David was motivated by earthly desires for him to go and bring down Goliath. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches. 1. Will give him his daughter. 2. And make his father's house free in Israel. 3. And David spake to the men that stood by, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth the Philistine? Now, David was not motivated by faith. And you see, sometimes you might not understand. This is why you don't have zeal for the kingdom, because all your incentives are spiritual. You know why you can't pray? You have no zeal for prayer. There's no incentive. You know why you have no zeal to fast? Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Hebrews chapter 11, from verse 1. Now faith, meaning the faith which manifests now, is a substance. But this substance has to be attached to a hope. Now, the hope that David has, which is causing this substance to be activated, is those 3 incentives. Okay? 1, riches. 2, a woman. 3, his family. David is not fighting Goliath for God. No. Faith is in man's heart. But you must remember that your spirit is carried by a body. No matter how spiritual you are, your body carries the spirit. And if your body is not involved in the transaction, your spirit will be willing, but your flesh is weak. What do I mean your flesh is weak? There is no incentive. David was motivated by earthly desires for him to go and bring down Goliath. You know why you have no zeal for the kingdom? There is no earthly desire that you have seen the kingdom bring to you. The gospel is not satisfying your earthly desire. It's all about heaven, heaven, heaven. Okay, that's why you're not interested. Immediately, there is an earthly desire attached to what you want. Immediately, your hope becomes something which will carry your flesh to the battlefield. Something which will carry your flesh to your calling. You have left all this time, you leave your flesh behind. All this time, when God calls you, He calls your spirit. When God calls you, He calls. Okay, every time. That's why you see, even Moses was rejecting the call. God sends him to Pharaoh. He says, "Not me. Pick someone else." Why? His flesh was not brought into the conversation. It wasn't. Now, Goliath was the obstacle in the way of the promises made to David. David is no longer seeing Goliath as a giant. He's seeing him as a man standing between him and his woman. A man standing between him and his family getting free. A man standing between him and riches. The battle changed. It became personal to David because there was a promise attached to the battle. If you knew that if you prayed for the next 5 hours and you would get a contract worth 500,000, you will tarry in the place of prayer on your knees for 5 hours. Why? Because your flesh must understand a certain language which your spirit does not understand. How can I explain this in words that you can understand? The language your flesh understands and the language your spirit understands are different. If your flesh must be carried along in the place of prayer, if your flesh must be carried along in your calling, if your flesh must be carried along you must give your flesh a language it desires. You must speak to your flesh in a language it desires. Okay? David was a man full of the Spirit. David was a guy whom Samuel had already poured oil on his head. David was a guy who was going to be ready for the throne. He's not even interested in the throne. He isn't interested. Okay? Until it became personal. Personal why? It became carnal. Until you find a way of making the spiritual carnal. That's the only way the carnal body can feel like it is part of the journey to take you to that place. Because all this time you are fasting the flesh seems like it has been pushed away from the prosperity which you want. Every time you're praying, the flesh is never willing. Why is the flesh not willing? It is never part of the conversation. There is no incentive to the flesh. There is nothing. Because you're always fasting it, you're always beating it down. You're always crucifying it, you're always denying it. You are never denying your spirit, you're never denying your soul. You're always denying your flesh. You're always denying your flesh. Now, for you to defeat a giant, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Your body must be one. Your spirit, soul, and body must be in the conversation. For you to wake up and say, we are going to pray and we'll pray for 2 hours, the flesh must know why it is praying. It does not understand. The flesh is carnal.